to take you to the East Garden so I could show you what's been going on in here since our last time I made a video, which I think the last big video I did was June 21st. Today is June 29th. Happy birthday, Dad. And there's just a lot going on in here. I want to show you these pumpkin plants and how enormous they've gotten, and the tomatoes that have really taken off, the fruit that are on those. I mean, it looks amazing in here. So I just saw something really cool, but I'll show you in a minute. This is corn pumpkin plants, which you can see are really growing out over here and starting to cross the walkways. I mean, these leaves are huge. This is one of my favorite things to do, is to put my hand, which is rather large, up against these enormous leaves. This is 1, 2, 3 of my hands across. Is that right? 1, 2, yeah, about 3 of my hands across, which is just enormous. I love squash plants. They're so fun, especially pumpkin plants. And they're going crazy. And my plan is to try to help them vine through the pathways. Although if they vined through these tomato plants, it might not be too bad, since I keep these pruned up to about 18 inches or 2 feet. But I would rather them not cross into the tomato garden, but just kind of fill up these walkways. I would have to go back and do a quick research to remember, but I don't think squash plants, pumpkin plants, and tomatoes necessarily do great together. Worst case scenario, I let these kind of grow over in this area, but they are big and beautiful. And just look at this corn. It is taken off. It is so pretty. But what I just noticed today were the tassels showing up. So this right here is called a corn tassel, and it's at the top of the plant, of the male plant in particular, which is interesting. And this comes out and shows itself when the majority of the plant growth is done, which is interesting because these are only up to about my waist. I would have to look at the card again. These may not be tall corn plants, which actually would be fine. But these show up when the bulk of the growth is done, and what they are for pollinating the fruit that is going to grow on the corn, obviously, that grow on these plants. And I thought that was so cool that it's already coming out. And I noticed a couple over here as well. Let's see if I can get through here without stepping on plants. We've got some here, and these can be different colors. Last year, the ones that we grew were yellow. These have more of a purple cast to them. These are kind of green. So that is awesome. That may mean that we may have corn sooner than later. And then over here, we've got the Jackby Little pumpkin plants, which are measurably smaller as far as the size of the leaves go, but these will be enormous plants. They are very prolific. They grow like acorn squash, which is just really long vines and lots of fruit. So these will eventually, I'm going to be training them up these trellises, so I have all these little bitty orange pumpkins growing all over the trellises, which should be really cool. So I need to keep my eyes, and I'm trying to, on this right here, these tendrils that are coming out, so that I can train it to go this way. It's a little short at the moment. I would end up breaking the stem if I pulled too hard on it. But as it gets a little bit longer, I'll be able to kind of start tying it up over here, and it'll naturally grow up this trellis on its own. Check out these leaves. They're so pretty. I usually do my filming in the morning, and I'm out here at 5 o'clock at night, and it's really hot and the light isn't great. But here in the shade, you can see the variegation on these leaves, which are so pretty. And I think this is the Jarrahdale pumpkin, which is the really pretty, bluish gray winter squash that I'm really excited about, that hopefully I'll get something from this year. The Jarrahdale or the fairy tale pumpkin. This might be the Jarrahdale. I'd have to go back and look at my videos, but you can see the difference in the leaves. these really pretty, just bright green ones versus these variegated ones. So one way or the other, I know that these pumpkin plants are, this might be the fairy tale and this might be the Jarrahdale. The fairy tale are the really cute orange pumpkins with kind of like the grayish cream stripes on them that kind of mimic what you would think of for a fairy tale pumpkin. So that's really fun to see those coming in. And I'm curious if there's any fruit in here. I see lots of flowers coming up. These are all the male flowers. And the way you know this is because there's no fruit on the other side of the flower. So with all squash and pumpkin plants, male flowers are just a stem and a flower. Female flowers have fruit on the other end, such as here. We've got some patty pan squash growing. So you see, there's a flower and a fruit. And in order for these to grow into nice fruit that you can eat, the pollen from the male flower has to get into the female flower. Now, I'll be honest, I have not been seeing a lot of bees, but I'm getting tons of zucchini. So something has been pollinating these flowers in here. But you can always hand pollinate if you think that you are short on pollinators. So all you would do is you would pull off a male flower, which I'm looking for, like this. I could pull this male flower off. See, there's no fruit here. So here you have the male stamen inside, and I can touch this inside the open female flowers, which there aren't any open flowers right now because it's hot outside and it's the end of the day. This is something you would want to do in the morning when all the flowers are open. But you can touch this stamen to the female stamen and pollinate it. It's called hand pollination. If you feel like that you are not getting the pollinators you need to have fruit on your plants. So that is one thing that you can do to help your squash plants, your pumpkin plants, and your melon and your watermelon produce good fruit. The other thing I wanted to show you is that you can actually train your vining plants, specifically like your pumpkins and your squash, to grow a certain direction. And I'm gonna definitely be doing this with my large pumpkin patch that's behind me back over there that I've shown you in other videos, because I want them to grow straight so that I have walkways in between and I know where the specific vines are. And that means you have to pay a little bit more attention to your plant to make sure it's not going off on its own. But you can train them a direction to go, whether it's on the ground or on a trellis, in order to maximize your space. So let me show you an example of that right here. Very well, but you see this vine right here. This is going to a plant way back in here. This one. And this is its main shoot that it's sending out. Now it's sending out another one right here, but this is its main stem. So what I'm trying to get it to do is grow straight down this path. And so I'll just come out and adjust it. If I needed to, I could put some rocks or something to kind of keep it from going over there. And with this plant that's past it, I could do the same thing and having it grow along a pathway and just using rocks to get it to turn a certain direction. So that it's not growing crazy all over the garden. And so you can actually, like I said, train your pumpkin and squash plants to grow a specific direction if that'll help maximize the space in your garden, which is what I'm trying to do here. And so see, I have a rogue stem right here, vine, from that one over there. So I'm gonna go and move it and straighten it out so it doesn't come into this garden. So I'm just picking it up and I'm moving it over here on to this pathway here, and they will send out little like feelers, little feet, I guess you could call them, that will send down into the ground and kind of anchor it to the ground over time. If you were to break them off, it's not going to hurt the plant, but it is just a way that it anchors. And see, this one is all kind of stuck up in here on this corn, which is fine. I'm just going to try to move some of this corn out of the way so that this vine can lay down a little bit more onto the ground. And this is just kind of garden maintenance, you know, just kind of coming out and checking what's going on with your plants and helping them to grow the direction and the way you want it to. And as you can see in here, it's caught on these corn plants. So I'm gonna turn the camera off and try to straighten this out without breaking this plant. thing you can do to help your squash and pumpkin plants grow really well and to avoid powdery mildew, which is what most squash plants are super susceptible to, is to give them more aeration along the bottom of the plant. And basically what that means is you go in there and you, with clean scissors or clean garden shears, is you cut out some of these leaves, especially the ones that look older or yellowed, or are already mildewing. You want to cut them out, and it gives more room to the plant in there to get air, because what happens is they get moist and the heat and the moisture cause the powdery mildew. So if you're able to get the air flowing in and throughout the plant, then that helps protect against the powdery mildew. It also helps the pollinators be able to get inside the plant and see first and reach the flowers, because these pumpkin plants can get so thick. Sometimes the flowers are hidden by these enormous leaves, and it makes it more difficult for the pollinators to see the yellow flowers. Now, generally that's not a huge issue, but I would just suggest going in there and cutting out 1 or 2 or 3 leaves a day from each plant, even if you're only doing 1 plant a day, depending on what you can handle in your schedule. It will really just give you a much healthier plant. So let me kind of show you on this one. I don't have my shears, or I think I left them inside, but I'll show you what I would do if I were to prune this plant. So we have 2 different pumpkin plants that are crossing here. We've got like I mentioned earlier, the fairy tale and the Jarrahdale pumpkins crossing. It just makes for a very crowded environment in here underneath all these leaves, as you can see, a bunch of intersecting highways. So what I would do is I would come in here and I would just pick a few leaves to cut out. And a lot of times I tend to start with the ones that are the lowest to the ground, like this one right here, because when they're laying on the ground like this and they're getting backsplashed from the rain or from your water, they're going to be the first ones to get any sort of mildew or yellowing. Like this one right here, you can see that here it's laying on the ground. It's like very yellow. And so this would be the first one that I would cut out. Maybe this big one here. Maybe one of these right here, this one that's kind of caught between the branches. I would cut off this one, and I would go as close as I could back to the root of the plant, just to kind of help with any sort of rot that might happen at the end of the stem. I'm going to train this guy to kind of grow through this corn pasture here. So this one right here is taking a beating, and then again, because it's on the ground, closest to the ground. I don't have my scissors, but I'm going to just show you, you can just rip it like that, but these can be really pokey and hurt your hands. Hang on, please. And I really don't like to leave this exposed like this. I really like to try to cut it back as far as I can, close to the plant. So I'll have to come back here later and kind of do a better cut on this so it's not mashed. Okay, I have my garden shears, which will make this much easier to get in here and clip out this vine, or this branch I should call it. This little one right here can go, so I'm going to go back in here and cut it at the base and pull it out. You want to pay attention, this is a vine. If I were to cut this here, I would lose all these branches and growth. So you want to make sure what you're cutting is just one leaf and not a vine. That'll make a huge difference. I'm going to cut this one out because it's kind of starting to look old. And I did wash and sanitize these shears because I used them on tomatoes the other day, and I don't want there to be any sort of cross-contamination. And then I'm gonna get this big guy in here. There's plenty of green on this plant, so it's not gonna suffer from losing a few leaves. It's gonna do much better to have that air getting to the bottom of the plant. But again, it's really like a daily chore if you wanna keep your plants nice and healthy, because they grow so much in a short amount of time. Okay, I've just gone through and pruned all these squash plants, which seems like a chore, but it's really not. I mean, I've cleared all those out, cleared that. Maybe it's taken me 10, 15 minutes. But what you see now is that you can actually see down into these plants. So I know that air is getting in here and bees can see the flowers. The yellowing leaves, the big leaves that are getting swallowed by all the new growth and anything that's crossing into the path of the other plant, that's kind of what I generally clear out. And then it just feels so much better and more open, and also a lot easier to see your fruit, because if it gets too thick, you're gonna have a hard time getting all your fruit. Some of my Nisterond coming in right there. There's another one down there, which I could easily miss if it was covered up by a big leaf. And there's some little baby ones coming in right there. Here you see my acorn squash that I'm trying to train to grow up this ladder, which I think will be really cool. Some of it will still grow out this way, but I'm trying to get the bulk of the plant to grow up, and then I'll trellis it down. And the wonderful thing about trellising your squash plants is that it just naturally opens up the plant for aeration in here, and they're much less apt to mildew or mold or have any sort of issues along those lines. Now, I still need to come in and trim. Like you see, this plant here has got some yellowing on it, so I'm gonna take off that leaf, and it's probably because it's closer to the ground. But just being able to be off the ground like this one, like this, is gonna provide, make for a much, much healthier plant. Well, it's a week later, y'all. I had to do some editing on that last video and didn't really ever get to close it out. So here I am a week later, and actually, how perfect is this to be able to show you what's happened in a week? These squash plants and pumpkin plants are huge. And I think a good reason for that is not only the weather and the rain that we've gotten, but just the measures I've taken to keep them healthy by pruning them and trying to train them to go whatever direction I want them to go. Now, they're still wild and crazy and wanting to do their own thing, but with just a little help, you can really create a healthy plant. And it has taken practice over the years. There is still going to be happenstance that happens, like children who run through here and squash the vines, which happened yesterday, but they're still going to grow. They can still produce beautiful fruit, and I will show you how much we harvested yesterday, which was super fun. So let me give you the last little video snap here of a week later. And if you have any questions about this process, you can put them in the comments below. Any suggestions of content you'd like to see in the coming weeks, please leave it in the comments below as well. And I will do my best to adhere to that. Happy planting.